Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to another one of our podcasts, the Three Wise Potatoes. We welcome back, Prush and Dean. How are both of you this evening?
Hello.
Good, good.
Yeah, can't complain.
Just a bit feeling the seasonal change.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going from winter to
springtimes.
yeah
Well,
to the
we
spring
went
times.
we went from the Alps to the fires of hell.
It is quite warm, huh? Like,
Yeah.
Hey, bro, it's baking.
I woke up this morning. It
Global
feels like my
warming.
throat feels like sandpaper. No, what's going on?
Damn.
That's how I was feeling this morning.
I don't know what
Literally.
it is though.
That's exactly how I was feeling, and I was like, I thought that it was like I was getting a cold or something,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think it's just the season changed so quickly, and then pollen and all of that stuff came out of nowhere. Now you're struggling.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll hopefully it's just a passing little phase, and you'll feel better soon. Both of you will feel better.
Yeah, I got stuff to do this weekend. Can't be.
Wait, what stuff?
Yes, you do. Yes, you
Busy.
do. Oh, okay. Well, once again, it isn't one of my topics this fine week.
Yeah, just chilling.
This is
Getting away
it's
with
me
it.
chilling in. Yeah, that's true. This is Pressure's topic this week, so it's a surprise to both Dean and us once again, and myself, excuse me, once again. So I'm just gonna hand over the reins to Mr. Presh.
Why, thank
Who will
you.
lead us through.
Why, thank you. Why, thank you. So, I've been I was listening to some of our other casts recently, and I was going through some stuff, like personally and things, and I was like, there must be such a nice way to create, or there's a nice avenue that we can discuss in terms of developing thinking processes. So I wanted to create a sort of maybe mini series or even like a two-part series on like a topic what I wanted to call thinking building, right?
Mhm.
So in thinking building, it's basically the idea of how do you use thinking processes and um, uh, self habitual processes to cut out some of the things in your life that are slowing you down or making things more difficult for you, just so that you can improve your life in small ways that'll help you like progressively become more comfortable with yourself, right?
Mhm.
But also like achieve your goals. Because Yash was doing the whole thing of let's create a list of things that we want to target for the year
Yeah.
and how do we meet them. So I was like, okay, one of the things that I struggle with is procrastination, right? And then some other people's will struggle with procrastination or some other areas of their life. And there's a few topics and areas that are we can cover under this thinking building topic. But the first one that I wanted to start with was it's a personal one to me because I'm a bit of a procrastinator, right? So um, I like to look deeper into the topic and understand what it is that is the underlying thing that's causing the procrastination, but also how we can deal with it and how we can also explain to people how they can understand and how they can deal with it. So what in your guys' mind is we know what procrastination is, but what is the cause of procrastination? And do you see it as like a bad thing? Do you see it as something that just falls within certain people, or do you see it like everybody has some level of procrastination in their lives, and um, i- is it can it very negatively impact your life?
Um, so I mean, if I had to look into my own circle, I would say like maybe 95% of the people I know procrastinate on some level. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't think I can't say procrastination is a positive thing. So yeah, like you feel disengaged, or at least I feel disengaged from the subject matter, and that's why I don't want to do
Hmm.
it. But I haven't. I'm struggling to think of a scenario where procrastination was good or led to a good outcome, except for maybe putting myself in a very stressed, high pressurized state, and then more of my brain started triggering. But beyond that, I can't really see the benefits to it.
So just taking a step back from that as well, and not going to the benefits just yet. I'll get to that now. But for me in particular, I think procrastination is one, a defense mechanism for me, and two, it represents like you putting off something that isn't on a level of importance. I think we discussed this when you guys were here, this past week, right? We procrastinate because something is just not important enough for us to do, and it's not in the forefront of our minds, and hence we kind of just put it off until we get to a point where we can't put it off anymore, and then it leaps to the front and then becomes the most important thing for us to do at any given point in time. So for me, those are the two things that procrastination represents, and I mentioned it's like a mechanism of defense or protection mechanism, because sometimes you want to be kept in your bubble. Like your brain is there to protect you all the time. Doesn't mean it's there for good purposes, but it's there to kind of keep you in your bubble, in your space. And if putting something off protects you from doing things that are uncomfortable, then that's what your brain is gonna push you toward. So those are the two things that procrastination means to me. Now, when we look at, like Dean mentioned, like the benefits of it, I agree that there aren't any. Well, there could be positive benefits to it at a point, but I can't see them. And it is 100% a time stealer.
Yeah.
If you're like a focused person, or a person that has particular goals and is sort of driven, you might procrastinate less, because Dean's 100% right. There's within our own circles as well, there is a level of procrastination in all of us. Like, for example, even in me, I procrastinate sometimes as well. But like, it's a massive time stealer away from things that you should be doing, if you do have those plans and goals and things that you want to get done. But like I mentioned, it's if something's not important enough, it's just not you're gonna keep putting it off.
It's a bunch of detours.
Yeah, and it is. But it's self. I think it's self-inflicted detours. Not inflicted. I don't know if inflicted is the right word.
I actually think it is. I like the way you framed that.
I think it,
because you're hurting your own progress, and I think the word inflict covers that quite nicely.
But also, procrastination is a habit built over time.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't just learn it overnight. Like I remember my mum telling me when yes, you have to kind of study now because your test tomorrow. And when I was really young in school, I was a chief procrastinator back in the day, and I just remember that now, and yeah. So
you come a hell of a long way. Weird. If I look at my own circle, I would say, like listeners, Yash is probably the one person we see consistently beat procrastination.
Well, it took a long time for me to get there, but it's everyone has that, and within them, like I built it in that period, because things were more exciting to do. Things were more what is it? Yeah, I just didn't want to do any work. I just didn't want to do the things that I should have been doing at that point in time, because they just weren't on the same level.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have touched on quite a few things there, and I want to unpack them just a little bit, because there's some meaning behind a lot of what you're saying. So, like yourself and Yash said, you don't feel that there's a positive aspect to it, which I can more or less agree with, because obviously in terms of forward momentum, it's always going to hold you back. But to break that down a little bit more, Yash, you were saying that it's not important enough, right? That's one aspect. You're saying it's not important enough, and I think we discussed this as, and I think you can break it down very simply. But the other aspect that you discussed was, it's uh, it's something that you're putting off doing,
Hmm.
right? And I want to break that down just a little bit in terms of putting it off doing, because you've given two valuable reasons, right? And I think they they are underlying um, messages there, if you know what I mean. And for me, understanding those underlying messages is what is a key breaker in the procrastination, if you know what I'm saying, right?
Hmm.
Because once you label those items, depending on whatever the scenario is, right? Once you look at whether let's say that the two aspects of procrastination is, um, like you said, the reason isn't strong enough, or the
Yeah.
item that you're going after isn't as important to you right now, which I
Yeah.
think Dean touched on as well. It became so important that the pressure came out, and then he had to do it.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect is that um, you're you're putting it off, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like those are two big or major reasons as to why people procrastinate. And if we can break down each one of those just a little bit more to,
Yeah.
let's say, label the underlying issue, I think that
So
would be so
if I
important.
can use the same the same example from history, from my history, for example.
Mm, mm,
And when I was really young, and I had to go study and things like that.
mm,
Now, one of the reasons that I've identified why I procrastinated in those instances is because, without tooting my own horn, excuse me, that I was really good at studies, for example,
okay.
and I didn't need to study in order to get something done.
Mm,
Um, so at the back of my mind, what it was is, okay, I'm really good at this, so I don't really need to do this.
okay.
I could have just skirted through on the knowledge that I already had. And so procrastination for me was like, nah, studying is not important because I have the knowledge and I have the comfort of knowing in the back of my mind that I can still accomplish what I can accomplish.
Mm,
And bringing that forward in today's life, for example, is, when I say, um, you know, it's not important enough. It's just that at that instant, you can get it done. You
okay.
know you can eventually get it done, and therefore,
Oh,
you'll put
okay.
it
Now I
off
see where
until
you're
the
going with
point
this.
that yeah, you put it off until the point that you actually need to get it done, right? So that's me in particular, and that's what
Yeah.
I've identified as the root cause of me procrastinating. It's just belief in the ability that I have. Therefore, I don't need to do this now.
Okay.
In that case, right? So that's that one, and it may be different for other people as well.
Yeah.
So my core reason might not be the same as your core reason.
Are there different
No, but
types of, sorry,
yeah. Mm.
can I just
No,
ask,
go for it.
are there different
Yeah.
types of procrastinations then? Because sometimes something is important and
Yeah.
you need to put the work in order to achieve it, right? There's no getting away from it,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
still put it off.
Yeah.
And then there's
Yeah.
the other type, which is what Yash was talking about, where he didn't necessarily need to put the work in. He could still get by. So in one case, he's being dismissive because he can do it. In another
Yeah.
case, the person would be just dreading having to do this thing because maybe they don't have the
So
confidence or whatever it is
So
to actually
so
complete it.
remember, I also
yeah.
said it was there's two things that I identified. One is a
Yeah.
protection mechanism,
Yes.
and one is the one where you think, right. So your brain is keeping you in your comfort zone because you don't want to do something uncomfortable.
Okay, so you're rooting it back
Right.
always to comfort. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your brain is a protection mechanism. It's meant to protect you at all
Keep
in
you
all
alive,
costs,
yeah.
in all cases. Yeah, and that is what I bring it down to, that I've identified. In fact,
Right. So if we had to break down the one that you broke down was very, I think, in parts you both have covered it very well. It's a thing of, I know I can do this, right? But it just feels like the pressure right now isn't strong enough for me to do it. Like the
mm-hmm.
will needed to complete this item is not there right now, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one form or element of that procrastination, like you're saying. But like Dean touched on now, there's another element, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that element, I think, for me, is something that affects people a lot more. Because with procrastination, like you're saying, putting things off when you know you can do them isn't really too much of a challenge.
No.
When you get to that pressure stage and then you do it, I would say that's in some ways efficiency, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Um, Right. Now, yes, it's still procrastination because you could complete it earlier, But the other form of procrastination that I think is important to touch on is that protection mechanism that you're talking about, in terms of it's going to hurt me if I do this now. And Dean touched on it very well. Um, how do you how does a person now decide and look and say, is this, am I procrastinating because I know I can do this later, or am I procrastinating because it's going to hurt me?
So I think for me, when I was identifying it, it's like what was I feeling at that point?
Mm,
What did my body tell me?
mm,
So it's about being
Aware.
conscious and aware. Yes, yes, that's the word I was actually looking for.
mm,
Aware. It's about being aware of your state at that point in time. Like if
mm.
something, if doing something gives you that, I don't know how can I describe that, this inner feeling of this jittery inner feeling.
Jittery good or jittery
Uh,
nervous?
no, jittery
like
nervous, the nervous one,
anxious
the
bad.
nervous one.
Okay.
Yes,
Anxious,
that
anxious,
yes,
Anxious was the
anxiety.
word.
like
Yeah.
that anxious state.
Mm,
Then you'll know it's because a protection mechanism is like kind of kicking in.
Yeah,
mm,
your
It's like
fear mechanism kicks in and you're alert.
yeah, and you kind of feel that. So it's I mean, everyone's felt that anxious feeling before, and that's in my case what I've identified. I think we've spoken about this in our previous podcast, how I identify what my feelings are like. It's always
yeah,
physical for me. So anger
yeah.
is always one thing, sadness is one thing, whatever, right? So I've 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 built that into me to be self-aware.
Mm,
So if I had to say how to identify it, that's how I would identify it,
okay,
as an anxious feeling.
okay. And yourself, Dean, is it a similar thing?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to find the right words for it, and I don't know if I have the right words,
Mm,
but for lack of a better term, I wait to get into a fight or flight state before I do things,
Mm,
because then
mm,
I'm properly dialed on, like I'm fully alert, and my focus doesn't get broken,
mm,
because it can't get broken. Now you only have
mm.
a few hours to deliver something, or to do a piece of work or whatever it is, and like when you're in that fight or flight state, that's when you are pretty much at your highest ability to actually do things. From an evolutionary standpoint, you either have to, it's fully survival mode at that point. And I mean, like, now we don't have to run from lions or anything, but there is still something fairly
Mm,
daunting that's waiting for you, and you have to overcome it. um, it's just by no means a healthy way of doing things. It's just that
mm,
in terms of, Yash mentioned how it's always coming back to a place of comfort. Whether it's not doing something you don't want to do because you can't, or because you just don't have the inclination to, and what you always come back to what's comfortable. It's when that comfort is broken without your choice, and you then get put into a state of fight or flight. You no longer have the
I
comfort. That's
see.
not even an option anymore. Now you just have to do it.
I see.
I think
So,
we
mm,
talked about sorry, Prash. We
no,
talked
that's fine.
about touched on this. I think when you guys were at my place,
Yeah.
and
Mm,
we said some people thrive in that area
mm,
where it's. I think they'll wait for that last minute
mm,
and then kind of attack something, right? So they'll
mm,
procrastinate, and they'll be like, "Oh, I need this fix of power."
yeah.
So and then only I'll tackle something, then only I'll do the something that I was procrastinating,
Mm.
because they live in that moment. For some, it might be that even. It's not any of the others that we mentioned, but they like to thrive in, and they get excitement
Mm.
from like the adrenaline, and like Dean just mentioned, fight or flight, and waiting for those to kick in.
It's very interesting that you say that, because that adrenaline is what some people actually crave, and
Mm,
then they fear the numbness of doing it slowly.
I
Um,
love the way you put
in
that.
terms of
yeah.
it makes it boring for them. And or it's like, that death of a thousand cuts. I'm doing this very slowly, but now if I'm in a pressure situation, it's like it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And this is what I wanted to I
Corporate
wanted to,
adrenaline
because
junkies.
you guys have hit on a very key points, right? And just before we go to those points, because I think what you're touching on now is so important, right? But if we could bring it back just one step to goal setting, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll see what I mean by let's go to the next step and the next step. If we bring it back to goal setting, right? Now,
Mhm.
a procrastinator or even a normal person that puts things off. So let's just not say we're talking about procrastinators here. Let's talk about normal people. Normal
Mhm.
people goal set, right? And in 80% of cases, maybe even higher, most people will set all their goals and only do some of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and they won't do. If you set 10 goals, most people will do three, right? And those
Mm,
three will be the most fun ones, right?
mm.
Yeah.
It won't be the easiest ones, right? It'll be the most
No, I
fun
mean,
ones. Some of the
typically in
yeah,
society we teach low hanging fruit, right?
but no,
Quick
we
wins.
teach low hanging fruit. We teach low
Mm,
hanging fruit, right? But I don't know if you've noticed, but most people, even if it's something is insanely challenging, like those adrenaline junkies, they'll go and do something that they would consider low hanging fruit, but something else that's a lot easier for them to do, they will not do until it's absolutely necessary, right?
mhm.
Yeah, I get what you're
Now,
saying.
if we think about that, right, and we talk about goal setting, here's a question that I have for you. Why do people, right, target the things, right, the three things out of the 10, right, that they'll write down first on their list, right, in terms of goal setting? Those three things they'll go and hit with all their might and force, right? Even if it takes them 80% of the time required to do all the other tasks,
Because
right?
that's where they are emotionally aligned.
Right. They're
Well, that's my
emotionally
opinion.
aligned.
I don't know if that's
And
true.
no, I kind of agree with you. I don't know, Yash, if you have a different opinion. But um, for me, the question comes in is that why do some people find the the challenge in mountains, right, different from the challenge in molehills, right? And what is the why does procrastination play such a big part in the molehills versus the mountains?
That's a hard question.
It is a hard question,
Bring,
but
so just bringing
uh,
the heat
uh,
today. Yo.
but do you understand what I'm
I
asking,
do,
right?
because if you said to
Mm.
someone you can climb 10 molehills in like 5 minutes, but that mountain's gonna take you 2 days, they'll go, "Yeah, I'm gonna go climb the mountain. Cheers."
Right. So what is in that? What is in that?
Can I go?
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
So I really do feel like it is what calls to you emotionally.
Hmm.
Like there's even though doing those 10 molehills will be healthier for you and have a lot more benefits and bring your life into wonderful alignment. You know, it might be 10 small things, but the difference it makes in your life combined would be massive. Um, but the draw of the mountain to it's attractive on a multitude of levels, and you just emotionally you feel like you'll get more from it, even though functionally doing the 10 molehills in the 5 minutes will give you way more in a realistic benefit world. The draw of that emotional benefit of climbing the mountain, even though you might not even make it to the top of the mountain, you only get like, you know, a
Hmm.
kilometer up and you'd be like, okay, I'm done.
Hmm.
It still feels like the thing to do instead of climbing the 10 molehills, even though logically the 10 molehills are the ones that you should tackle first.
Okay, I like that. Yash?
No, I think when people kind of set their goals, um, they don't. I don't know. I'm gonna be a bit harsh on people here. They don't think it through. Um,
That's fine.
We're not realistic.
it's we're not realistic in our goals. Also, the goals that you set aren't the goals that you really need right now.
Hmm.
I'm gonna just say that again because people set goals that aren't necessary for their forward path movement at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll set things like you're saying, right? So there'll be mountains and there'll be molehills,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll set things that they feel are achievable mixed with things that are not achievable. Um, and when I say that, they'll set a multitude of things which are achievable, and some things which are not achievable. But they'll look at the list and go, okay, I've achieved X, Y, and Z, and then I didn't achieve S, which was really big, and think that's a win. Um, Now, where I'm going with this is that um, when you look at in terms of procrastination, you'll wanna look at um, what is the word that I'm looking for here? Once again, I'm having one of
Is it to
my
do with comfort or
well, it's
choosing the right sort of things?
so
Context?
it's ease and comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If I just I'll remember the word at some point during this
Yeah.
podcast. So it's ease and comfort and
Alignment,
going with the ones.
Convenience.
It,
alignment,
and I mean it's
emotional
100%
alignment.
what Dean mentioned as well. It's going to what's easy for you. You'll build. You'll have your
A
easy tasks which you written down.
safe space.
Yeah, a safe space, and it's known unknowns, right? So
Mm.
you know what you know what you know, and you know what you don't know.
Mm.
So you won't want to tackle like those sorts of things.
Mm.
So they'll do the like in my experience and people that I've talked to, they'll do some of the molehills, but they won't do the mountain.
Mm.
Um, in my case, I'll do the mountain as well because,
Mm.
as Dean alluded to, because there's more growth there for me rather
Mm.
than things that are kind of easy to do.
Mm.
So the people gravitate toward what's easy, and they'll set some easy goals as well on their list, and they'll have some hard things, but they'll never get to them,
Mm.
and they'll never get through to it.
Okay,
In the
so
end.
But I think in this
so
particular case,
mm.
sorry, Guj, if I can just go
No,
back
that's
to
fine.
it. I think what Guj is asking is that people can identify the easy things that are achievable, but they'll still go do the hard thing first.
No, which is exactly the same thing with me. Like I just when I mentioned me as I don't see the small things as challenging enough for me, and so I'd gravitate to the hard thing.
So
But that's just in my case.
so that thinking process, right? The thinking process in terms of uh how both of you set it out is slightly different, right? You, like in Dean's case, he looks for emotional alignment, even though that mountain is harder to climb, right? And Yash will look for the challenge, right? Because he
Mm-hmm.
sees there's more growth there. In both cases, the outcome is still the same because you're both climbing the. Let's use an example of you both climbing the same mountain, but one,
Eventually, right? Because you'll have multiple
right?
molehills versus one mountain.
Of course, yeah. So, um, the reason why I didn't put the situation the other way around is because that's the basic situation of procrastination. Everybody hits the easy things, right? And it's hard for them to hit the hard things, right? The reason why I switched it around is because when we're setting goals, right? And like you touched on, Yash, people don't set the right goals or they don't prioritize the goals correctly. What happens if we now took all the goals and we made them all mountains or we made them all molehills, right? To as much as they can be, right? And then when we got to that set of goals, then we set the next set of goals. So it comes down to how we think about
Perspective, yeah.
how we get stuck, right? And I feel like it's so important that when we set the goals correctly, you can try to root out the procrastination in those goals by setting the right goals correctly, if you know what I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I let me ask you a question like this. Have you found in your life, right, in both of your lives, there were cases where you knew that the target that you were going to go for, you're going to procrastinate, right? And have you found cases where you've actually targeted that thing from the beginning and not procrastinated on it? If you can think back on any of them, or have you always procrastinated on something that just either wasn't in alignment with you or you felt like you could do it under um, a high pressure situation, right? Has there been a case where you've not procrastinated on something
That's not in alignment with me.
that's not in alignment with you?
uh,
I'm just thinking now, and
this is, yeah, I'm struggling.
yeah, no, I mean, I don't, I don't choose things that aren't in alignment with me in particular. This
Right.
version of me, anyway. Not that I can think of.
So
But there have been things where that I did choose, and I did put off.
right.
I can
So
think back, and I can think.
okay,
Yeah.
Dean.
Can you, okay, so I'm a little bit confused now because Yash said things that are not in alignment, right? So how do you define alignment?
So say for example, he picked three goals, right?
Yeah.
One of the goals was to get super fit. One of
Yeah.
the goals was to eat super clean, and one of the goals was to be really good at doing a language, right?
Okay.
And we know Yash, he's super fit, he eats super clean, but he only knows English, right?
Yeah.
Um, now he's
No hablas inglés.
no how he didn't even say that right.
Yeah, you
But
really did.
Yeah.
Butchered it.
so so I'm not saying that he's bad at other languages. I don't know how many languages Yash can speak. Maybe he can speak five. But in that example, he's put one off, right? Because it's not in alignment with the current needs or the current growth path that he wants.
Yeah.
Right. Now, when picking those three goals, he still picked the three goals because they were important to him, right?
Yeah.
But only after that did he realize. And he wasn't in he realized through time that he wasn't in emotional alignment with it, even though he thought he might be in the beginning. Right. But with the fitness and the eating well, right? At first he was in emotional alignment, but with Yash, he creates habit. He habit forms very quickly,
Yeah.
right? But with you and me, there is something that I need to do, and I'm not in emotional alignment with it, right?
Yeah.
I need to do something hard. I'm not in emotional alignment with it, but I'm going to do a little bit every day until I get there. Have you been in that scenario?
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'll say like getting healthier is something that's in
Mm.
alignment with me, but sometimes
Yeah.
like after a long day of work, I going to the gym is not. I don't feel like I'm aligned to that at all.
Sure.
I'll drag myself there, and I'll be
Mm.
miserable the whole time, but I'll do it because I know that it's something that's going to contribute. But there's no alignment. It doesn't feel like there's alignment. It feels like it's extremely forced, and so,
Okay.
I'll sit in the parking lot and I have to G myself to it, and that's procrastinating, but on a very small level. I'm like I have to
Mm.
remind myself like I am trying to be healthy so that later on in my life I don't develop bad conditions and I can be healthy and all those kinds of things. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
really I have to really logic the hell out of it and then link that
Mm.
logic to an emotional state before I can get my ass out the car and do my session.
I mean, you're building your why, right? At
Yes,
that moment, because your why has to be extraordinarily stronger
it's got to break
than
the
what you're
comfort
currently
of
feeling at that
you know
point.
what I'd rather just go home because at that point I can tell you now I would rather just go home and
I
order
mean,
pizza.
for example, you using the language thing, good for me, and
Mm.
my why was never strong enough to begin with for me to
Mm.
follow it through to the end, because it
Mm.
was always superficial. It was always a superficial want
Mm.
for me at the end of the day, and like you correctly pointed out, as I was doing it, I was like, whoa, this was not.
Mm.
I should have never chosen this sort of thing because
Mm.
it was never going to be part of me going forward,
Mm.
and so I'd continuously push it off.
Mm.
So you get the Duolingo push notification. And you're like, nah, I'm gonna ignore this. I'm gonna ignore this.
Just to
Sort of
clarify, I
thing.
didn't know Yash
Yeah.
tried different languages. I just used that as an example.
At some point, we all try different languages,
We've
fam.
all
Sure,
downloaded
sure, man.
Duolingo. Like at some point we have
Everybody,
all downloaded it.
everybody wants to learn like French and German and all these other things, right?
I went Italian. It
So,
lasted a week.
so
No, it's just
yeah.
100% like you say. It's not in alignment, and I keep pushing it off, and I keep
Mm.
pushing it off, and I
Mm.
keep pushing it off, and then that obviously, with like you correctly mentioned as well, it's like I built habits.
Mm.
That habit never formed, and it fell away.
Mm.
After a few weeks, after I realized it's not in alignment to me, I'm done with this. Let's move on.
Right. So look at the contrast that I'm hearing, right? The one contrast is um Dean, like, okay, so the difference, Yash habit forms very easily because he makes his why strong enough. That's how he puts it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Dean, and I think I'm very similar to Dean, right? Dean is one of those people that will go, listen, I need to do this because of XYZ reason. And then now that I've created these reasons for myself, this is my why, right?
Yeah.
And then he builds that why strong enough up in his head to do it, right? And then I'm sure after a while that habit forming, you realize that there was something in this training element that you enjoyed,
Yeah.
right?
You start to feel better about it.
Yes, right. So now my question, or my next question, that comes in is when when is it the right I think in this discussion that Yash was saying with the languages and even with yourself, there's two things that I want to ask about this. One, how do you know when you've created this habit forming ideal? Because procrastination is broken by habit forming, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And now that you've identified that, when do you know in this habit forming session that you're in emotional alignment with it, right? And when do you know that if you're not in emotional alignment with it, how do I cut bait? Because obviously we're talking about goals here, and you can change your goals whenever you want, right? How do you know that this is the goal that I need to be targeting? Because as much as you want something to be the target and the goal, right? How do I know when to change? And is this making sense? Does this not make sense anymore? Can I change into a different direction that might be better for me. You know, instead of Dean going to the gym, Dean can say, listen, I'll go play soccer and still get the training that I want, right?
Yeah.
Or Yash saying, listen, I don't want to learn language through Duolingo. I'd rather go to a class where I can meet people and just learn through discussion, you know?
So either way, you
So you're
still
still
get the outcome.
achieving, yeah, you're still achieving the same outcome, but you're doing it in a different manner, right? That
Okay, so you're asking
is
not
in
about
emotional alignment with
changing the
yourself.
goal, you're asking about changing the method.
Yes, because the goal is the reason. There's a reason why you set the goal,
Yeah.
right? The outcome is still there. When you get to the goal, will you only know whether that's what you wanted or not, right? Or
Got you.
if you're like Yash, you decide early, you realize you don't want it. I'm pretty sure Yash still wants to learn the languages, right? He maybe hasn't found an outlet that'll give him
Mm.
that, right? So when do you know whether it's going to work or not? Because in a lot of cases, like we've discussed, there's uphill,
Yeah.
right?
I think some people as well like there's something else that we kind of need to just have a butt in that there
Yeah,
as well. Some people quit too early,
right.
and they'll quit their goal too early because, like you're saying, there's uphill,
Mm,
and at that first stumble they'll kind of throw in the towel. I
mm,
didn't quit too early, by the way. So when I was learning Spanish, I went right up to, I think, where I could take a Spanish exam, like first level exam,
mm,
and then I was like, meh, I put that off.
mm,
So that sort of thing. So I did actually get quite far in that whole thing,
mm.
but until it became less relevant and less important to me.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is, just you need to, if that goal
Mm,
is really important to you.
mm,
So if it's something that you see, like that's going to help you and move you forward, then you need to stick it out and not just like what I did,
mm,
cast something to the side at the end of the day. So I think it's important to just understand if that goal is truly and really meaningful to you to carry on. And how do you identify that? Like one of Prash's questions is, I think we mentioned this in our previous podcast. It's like there's this feeling that you kind of get, or that you build as you move along whilst doing something. It's like this, I don't know, this joyous feeling. I think, I can't remember, Prash, you used like a phrase or a sentence or word to kind of describe that.
mm.
I just can't think of it right now. Once again, I'm using my words. But it's like this in sync feeling, and it's something that
Alignment?
starts to say
Alignment.
again. Yeah, for lack of a better, yeah, okay, alignment, and starts building this feeling of joy within you whilst you're doing it.
Mm,
Something, if doing something is not bringing you joy at any particular point in time, you'll feel it. Like
mhm,
if it feels more like work than actual elation,
mhm.
then you'll know. You can bait and switch, and you can change the mechanism, like one of your other questions was.
Yeah.
Like, if gym is not the outlet for me, it's not making me happy. Let's switch to something that I'm more into, like Roomba, or whatever,
Yeah.
skateboarding or whatever. Like that's a different mechanism which I am happy with, for
Mm.
example, and I'll know that instantly as well. Like you can always bait and switch until you find something that is more in alignment with you and does bring you joy in some sense.
I think that's a
Okay.
good point.
That's
Like,
my take
it's
on it.
2022. There are a hell of a lot more options than we ever thought possible.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay. So
definitely.
so what I'm getting is that when you pick your goals, whatever your goals are, right? And I'm just taking from what you guys have said,
Mm.
because I want to build on what you've said. So whenever I pick my goals, whatever they are, say I pick 10 goals for the next year,
Yeah.
and as I'm doing some of them, I find that some are more challenging than others, and I start putting some off because I can see that there's a level of fear in myself, or there's a level of pressure required,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And obviously, in some ways, I can deal with the pressure in some situations, and in some ways, there's a level of fear. But now I want to actually hit and target all my goals, right? So I want to break them down just a little bit more. And personally, for me, from what I'm seeing is that the quicker you can get to your goal, or the quicker you will find your target in your goal, is the more I find emotional alignment with what I'm doing to reach that goal. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we break it down that way, right? Um, what habits, right, or what things have you found that you've done in the past, right, that have worked for you really well, right? Even in targeting your goals and things like that. You can use a single example that have worked for you very well that maybe somebody else could use in a certain environment just to reach their goals. You can talk about fitness as an
So
example because a lot of
I
people
think
like that one.
I think when you set a goal, it's not just about having that final peak that you're after.
Yeah.
There's on that journey to that peak, or the molehill or whatever. It's a multitude of steps that you can
Mm.
take, and each step is a bit of a habit that you need to kind of form.
Mm.
I think my morning routine, which I've mentioned on quite a few of the podcasts, is choose something in the morning um, that's attainable for that day. It doesn't have to be 10 things. It can be
Mm.
one thing that's attainable for the day, and set out with a mindset that you'd want to achieve it, that you really want to achieve it. So, for me, that is my methodology, and perhaps a simple thing that everyone else can do. I think Dean has um, this vision board and the post-its, for example,
Mm.
as a visual thing,
Mm.
a visual reminder of someone, completing a task, or with the goals written down and the steps taken to kind of get to that,
Mm.
the completion of that task and goal. Um, and so it's the first thing you look at when you get up in the morning, and you build your day based off of that
Mm.
particular thing. And you don't have to do it early in the morning as well. It's you choose one thing that you want to get done for that day, give yourself a time, and then a time limit as well, and then when you're going to start and when you're going to end that thing. You don't
Okay.
have to complete the task by that point,
Mm.
but you take a minute step toward completing that task. And if you do that every day, you'll find that the habit of the specific time that you set, for starting and ending that task,
Mm.
you'll find it's second nature now. You'll find if you miss, like that goal achieving period,
Mm.
you'll feel like you missed something for the day.
Mm.
And so those are just some of the steps that I would suggest.
Okay.
Okay.
Dean?
Okay, so there's two that I'll talk about, right? So the one is the example I used for the gym, right? Where I went through the process of explaining to myself the logic for why I'm doing it, and then the emotional state that I want to get into. The reason I did that is because I find that if I try to G myself up emotionally, that fades very quickly. And then it leads to a lot of like self-disappointment afterwards. So
Yeah.
personally, like setting up the foundation of logic first and then stacking emotion on top of that works enough to just get me into the gym to do my stuff. Once I'm there, I mean, I'm miserable as sin for like the first half an hour, and then after that I kind of get into the rhythm. Like after I do the obligatory warm-ups and things like that, so that you're safe when you're doing your exercises. Once I'm in it, then I kind of get into a meditative rhythm, and I'm generally happier then, and I'm always happier afterwards. Like at the end of it, I always feel very happy that I did it. I've touch wood, never regretted going to the gym and actually working out when I didn't want to work out. And like you could say that for other things as well, like just like maintaining your mental state, maintaining your emotional state. Like sometimes you're in a state where you just don't want to be logical. You don't want to actually just try and do the healthy thing or choose the healthier option, but stack the logic up first, then put the emotional benefits for that logic. So figure out what that outcome feels like. So here's all the logical things of why I'm doing this. What am I going to feel like if I do this? And that's usually what knocks me into the right frame of mind. Then there's procrastination.
Just before you go on, Dean, I just want to ask you something. Do you feel that you would need to do that psyching up every single time going forward?
No.
And how long will that last as well? Like, when do you feel
so? Like sometimes
that you won't need it anymore?
Sometimes it's not like I'll never need it. I'll always need it, but I don't need it often enough for me to think to myself, right, this is something's wrong where I have to G myself up every day. I don't get to gym every day and then sit in the parking lot convincing myself to go in. There are plenty. Then there's a problem, right? Like listeners, if you're in that situation, you gotta really look at things. So that happened to me earlier this year. So I went through different training programs because I was trying to figure out what works for me. So
Mm.
first couple of months, so that was Jan and Feb, I was jogging every day in the afternoons. I would do a trail run. There's a nature. I'm very fortunate that there's a nature reserve opposite my house. So not everybody is that fortunate. So definitely some privilege coming through there. But
Mm.
I was doing that every day, and I was super happy. I was just in such a good place. I was out in nature. I was very calm afterwards. I felt at the end of that session, I would feel way more energized. I'd have energy to come home and do things. I would study.
Mm.
I would do meal prep. I would clean. I would do all kinds of stuff. It was ridiculous how happy I was. And I said to myself, right, at the end of that, I'm going to move on to the next training session or the next training method. And that was the Insanity program. And literally, that
Yeah.
one there was every single day I had
Insanity.
to convince myself to do this. And some days I didn't make it. I just was like, no, I don't have it in me today. And I felt terrible
Mm.
afterwards.
Mm.
And like that terrible thing meant like next week I'm going to go even harder. And it was so disruptive. I never realized how much more in alignment I am to jogging than doing the Insanity program.
Mm.
So I had to make the call to cut that and then go back to the jogging just to kind of get my headspace back to where it was and get to a happier
Yeah.
place. So there's in that case there, I identified as much as this program has a lot of benefits, it doesn't benefit me on an emotional and physical level, whereas the jogging benefited me on an emotional and a physical level, and probably on a mental level as well. So right now with gym, I would say let's say I go 5 days a week. Um, Pretty much 4.5 of those days. So some weeks, all 5 days, I walk in with a smile on my face, happy as Larry.
Mm.
But there are other
Mm.
days where I just had a really rough day at work, got into too many meetings. I'm very low energy. Like sometimes,
Mm.
like meetings can just sap whatever enthusiasm you have for that day, and come like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock when you're trying to get onto the treadmill and do your warm ups afterwards and then go and lift weights. There's no motivation to do it. And those are the days where I have to, okay, why am I doing this? Okay, these are the logical reasons as to why I'm doing it. What's the emotional benefit behind it? I'm going to be a healthier 40, 50-year-old, whatever it is. I'm not going to have to be on medication, things like that. So there's like, how am I going to feel? And I do that. Does that answer the question?
Is there? Yeah, it does. Is there a possibility then for people who are um, habitual procrastinators to use that as well as a procrastination step as well? You know
See, it depends
that.
because the next example I was going to give, because there's two reasons. There's procrastinating because I really don't want to do something. I just don't have the energy or the willingness, like the emotional energy to do it's not there. That's actually in both examples. But in one case, this gym is going to benefit me in the long run. The other thing I procrastinate with a lot is admin. Like the HR department, I'm pretty sure they're going to shoot me in the kneecaps one of the days because I just don't do my timesheets on time. Like they are gunning for me. But what I found is that on days where I choose to do my timesheets, I do something. It's very low commitment, um, and it's as simple as I'm not going to do all my timesheets. I'm just going to sit down for 5 minutes. I'm not going to put a timer on, but I'm only committing 5 minutes of this misery. And more often than not, I'll knock out 15, 20 minutes of admin, whether it's timesheets, whether it's emails, whether it's, whatever it might be, just general admin, which is the bane of my existence. I don't look at the whole admin. I'm never trying to do the whole thing. I just commit to 5 minutes. And you lose track of time very quickly. You get into the rhythm and you look up and all of a sudden you've knocked out quite a bit. That's how I look at it. And it actually came from something Yash told me a while back. And I think he told it to both of us. And it's like, I think the word was no 0 days, or the phrase was no 0 days.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes to get your no 0 days, all you need to do is just assign 5 minutes to something, and you can do quite a lot of that something.
Okay, so I like how you've put it, and I picked up something that I noticed between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, I think Yash struggles more with the emotional control aspect, right? So he habit forms very hard. So he removes a lot of the emotional control aspect. Whereas Dean, you in some ways relish the opportunity to
I'm very emotional.
emotional control, but you struggle with the mental aspect. So if you look at both of your controller um, uh, strengths and your controller weaknesses,
Hmm.
you see how differently you both adapt to outrooting procrastination, right? Not to say that you guys don't have strengths in those areas either, but uh, I feel like, personally, from what I'm hearing, in one person they habit form really hard because it removes the level of having to deal with the difficult emotions, and in the other case there's logic and reason to develop the goal setting and the habitual
It's to support the
nature,
emotions.
right? So in both cases you're habit forming, but you're habit forming based on your strengths and your weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in some people, they'll have weaknesses in both, and in some people, they'll have weaknesses in strength, depending on the procrastination and depending on the goal and the target. What I would like to say is, if you look at all the goals that you've created for yourself, right, and you look at the weaknesses and strengths of each goal, and you look at the weaknesses and strengths that you have in each goal. So when goal setting, you're not only looking at the target and the goal, but how you can break it down and what habits you need to form for each one of those goals, right? As Yash would say, no 0 days. If you work on one habit per goal per day, right,
I like that.
you can accomplish, right, a lot based on where you see your strengths lie and where you see your weaknesses lie. And where you find things are working, they work well. And the more you find emotional alignment and mental alignment. So we've said emotional alignment is very important. But one thing that Dean brought up was mental alignment. And I feel like emotional and mental alignment put together in the habit forming process will actually help you a lot, to actually achieving your goals with a smile on your face, right?
Yeah.
Even though you've had downtime. So, from what I'm understanding, is it involves an entire circle of elements, right? From what I see. But look to your strengths to provide you with more strength in habit forming, and look to your weaknesses to find out which steps you need to take to complete your goal. Now, if I had to give examples on this, if you look at how you targeted training, right? Let's say, um, you looked at different ways of achieving the goal, right? And you mentally had to psych yourself up. So your weakness was in the mental aspect. But you found the overcoming the weakness by picking the right environment that removed the mental weakness,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a prime example of how you can overcome the mental weakness, right? Say for Yash, for example, Yash looked at a goal in terms of language, right? He did everything through habit forming, so he overcame the emotional weakness, right? That's one way to do it, right? And he got to a point where he was emotionally stable with getting the answer. He just decided not to go through with it because maybe the goal wasn't as important anymore, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that, for me, I think, is a really nice way to look at how you can target your goals, but also remove procrastination from what you're trying to do so that you can reach your goals more effectively, but enjoy it on the way. And that is probably the best way I can break down what you've given me in terms of information. But there's one more question that I have, and it's a topsy turvy question. What habits have you used
Our
in the
favorites.
past, right, that have worked well but aren't working well anymore because you've elevated? Or what habits that you've used in the past, right, that haven't worked well in the past, but because you've elevated, they work well now?
I may need to think about this.
You don't have
Yeah, I
to
mean,
answer it. You don't have to answer
yeah,
it because it's a personal question. It's a personal question
sure.
for everyone, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah,
But in looking at those habits, right, and the habits that you formed for yourself that worked really well in the past that don't work now, or work badly in the past that do work well now, right? That will also teach you about how much you've elevated, right? And when you understand that, then you understand the nature of how you can overcome some of the procrastination that you've overcome. Because if you look at the emotional weaknesses or the mental weaknesses that you've overcome, right, you'll find that in those elements, in those journeys, you can repeat or reiterate or overcome the those procrastination topics. Because, like we said, procrastination is overcome in two elements: one, pressure, and two, fear, right?
mm,
Right? And fear has a lot of underlying elements, but the underlying target is fear: I can't do this, right? Or I'm not enough, or this is too difficult, or right? There's a whole host of things.
Yeah.
But when you break it down and you when you find the weakness, you can overcome it through habit forming. right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the other one is pressure. Pressure, in some cases, like you've done, Dean, you've put 5 minutes aside to do it. And when it comes to pressure procrastination, right, or procrastination require only overcome by pressure, the most common way that I've seen it is to either bring the goal to your face, right, which is what you do every 5 minutes when you do the goal, or wait until your face gets to the goal, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to be one of those people that has that completes things on time every time or before time, then like you said, Yasha's protocol of no 0 days is how you can solve that problem.
Words to
Now,
live by.
in saying that, is there any golden rules other than like Yasha's no 0 days
That's a
that
platinum rule right there.
That's that is the
That's
golden
diamond
rule.
rule, dude.
platinum diamond rule, right? Is there anything that you found that has helped you uh, overcome procrastination other than what we've discussed? Because there's a lot of elements, but we've broken it down to its most basic form, right? Is there any other elements that we have discussed that you can use for other people, or is there any other elements of procrastination that you find that um, can be uh, useful in overcoming procrastination for other people? I think I asked the same question twice, but is there any other elements of procrastination that we haven't discussed, right? And yeah, I don't know. Is there for me anything else that you guys would like to add to that topic?
Yeah, sure, wanna go?
Okay, so I think before we kind of tackle that, I think your statement or that question you asked us about personal, like what habits have we had before that kind of served us then but don't serve us now, and what bad habits that served us in the past but
Mm,
actually kind of work now, that sort of thing, right? So
mm,
the
mm,
opposing
mm,
habitual things that we
mm,
learned over time. So if I look at things in my past, right, whenever I set goals, and I look at what bad habits I had at that particular time,
mm.
um, it was the goals that I set, the habit that I had in terms of goal setting. The goals that I set were quite weak
Yeah.
in nature, so they weren't strong enough.
Okay.
And so I had a habit of forming weak goals, which led to either weak performance or me not sticking to those particular goals in the end of the day.
Okay.
And when I mean weak goals, I mean something that isn't really pertinent to helping me move forward,
Mm,
and therefore, I didn't really care about it past a certain point. So, so that was one of the habits, and then contrast that to now, where I don't set weak goals for myself. I set goals that are, yes, they're achievable, but there are some things that push me beyond limits, right? So, and that's the habit that I formed now, because I'm aware and cognizant of the fact that I can't set weak goals for myself anymore. They just don't serve me anymore.
Yeah.
So that's on that one.
okay.
And then I had a habit of 100% at that point in time. I had other things more enjoyable in my life back
Mm,
then, that I viewed as more enjoyable over the goals that I had. And
mm,
once again, it's a question of I built a habit around, okay, this something was more enjoyable to me than actually achieving my goals, and so I put it off, I put it off, I put it off, I put it off, and so that in order to break that habit, I built in things that don't serve me, don't belong in my life, sort of thing.
mm,
So those habits I force myself to remove, uh, and then I replace them with kind of good habits, or good things that will help me move to a particular point. Um, and so those are the two contrasting things that I built. So it's one where I recognized some things are not serving me, so I need to change those, because I'm at a different growth point now, right?
mm.
Um, and so those are the two things that I can think of.
Well, you
that,
built
that will hold.
That's
extraordinary
good.
self-discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was the foundation
right.
to
It
holding
takes
everything
it takes a
else.
lot of sacrifice as well. Like nothing comes without.
Yeah.
I, yeah, nothing comes without personal sacrifice, and it does take a toll. But yeah, no, you cut things out and you replace them with better habits.
Okay,
If I can say that
so
phrase.
so some degree of self mastery.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Dean?
Okay.
Specific
Oh,
to me.
sorry. Yes, I don't know if Yash was done, but
Oh yeah, Yash, anymore?
Yeah. No, sorry. I just wanted to mention we have 3 minutes.
Okay, before load shedding.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of specifically to goal setting, some advice I would give to people is that it's really about what you are comfortable accepting. So if you're trying to do something to better yourself and you're procrastinating, then you must be willing to accept that this is all you're going to have and you're not going to improve. But if you get to a point where you're not happy and you will not accept where you are and you need to progress, then that becomes, that tends to be strong enough emotional push. And you obviously, like for me, I got to stack the logic into why am I doing this? Okay, it's going to make me better in these areas. And on an emotional level, I can see how that's going to make me feel. And ultimately, it's all about compound choices. Every single choice you make is a choice that leads to a different timeline. And you are choosing which timeline you go with every single choice that you make. So every procrastination pulls you to a different timeline. Every time you push yourself to do something that's going to better you and you get it done, you are edging closer to the timeline where you are the best, happiest version of yourself.
Okay, that I think is in essence what I would agree with. It seems like there's a varying degree between you, but the underlying outcome is very similar in terms of how you habit form and how you deal with the scenarios that are coming about, which is it's so interesting.
There's no one road to
Yeah, yeah,
to El Dorado, for example. Right?
yeah,
There could be many paths.
yeah.
And how we all get there, we all take our own journeys.
Sure.
And it is very interesting, but I think that it's so important that each person evaluate by themselves how they get to that point and how they would like to get there, and um, use their strengths and with understanding their weaknesses overcome those challenges, and like you said, look to that level of self mastery and logic appeal to generate the steps towards your goals. And I think that for me is what I've learned from today. So I would like to say thank you for teaching me.
Likewise, thank you for the questions. I also learned a few
Yeah,
things. I mean, we always learn from Yash. Yash has got, like, we tell him this from time to time. Maybe we don't tell him enough, but we definitely admire everything that he's done and the processes and the self discipline that he's built. It's quite something to watch and learn from.
It is staggering sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so I would like to add one more thing. I know there isn't too much time left, but there's one more thing
Yeah,
that I
we might drop in a
well,
second, to be honest.
yeah, but because there's load shedding. But if you find that there's a goal that you can't reach through whether you've overcome it through overcome procrastination, whether you can or can't, that doesn't mean that you failed, right? Um, and procrastination isn't the only way. It isn't the only boulder in your path. But if you can overcome procrastination in one area of your life, you can do it in other areas. It's just about finding the right path. Um, and that's from what I've learned today. That's probably the best I can sum it up as well. Um, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you need to find the right way
Yeah,
that appeals to you to do it.
I agree.
Yeah. Any final words? Unless anyone's dropped off.
No,
I think, like you said, right? It's when you fail to meet a goal, it's not abject failure,
Mm.
and you can't. I think you shouldn't really chalk it down to um, well, when you're telling yourself this, I think you should chalk it down to, okay, I procrastinated, and then this is why. That's one of the reasons why I couldn't get it done, and maybe you have to upskill in other areas and then try that again. I've done that quite a few times as well. Like, I've set a goal, I couldn't reach it, and over time, I built up enough skill to say, okay, let me try and tackle this again, and that sort of thing. So it's not. Don't think that one failure is abject failure. You can always revisit as you go along. As you gain more skill, as you gain better habits, as you get better control of your time, and things like that. Yeah,
it's not a dead end; it's a
like
delay.
That. Yeah, no, yeah. God's delays are not God's now.
True.
Right? Yeah, so that's pretty much what I wanted to add.
Dean, anything from your side?
No, I think we've dropped quite a few pearls here. Hopefully, it'll help people.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason why I just brought this topic was because I'm a serial procrastinator as well. So, and in some areas I do excel, and in some areas I procrastinate. But I think it's a topic that a lot of people can use and learn from. I've certainly learned some stuff today. So, thanks,
As
guys,
have I.
and thanks for your input. It was quite, in my opinion, it was a good discussion.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Same here. Well, if that is all for this evening, if there's no more additional comments or questions,
seven close.
Nope.
Yeah, I think we're running on borrowed time here. So Dean and myself, especially.
Look, I think I definitely covered everything. So
I think so too.
that I wanted to. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank both of you for great conversation and for taking the time this evening for this
Once
podcast.
again,
Thanks,
very
guys.
sorry about being late.
No, it's
like really sorry,
all
guys.
Good.
No, it's
all good.
It happens.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks once again, listeners, for tuning in to the podcast. Three Wise Potatoes. This is us three signing off. Have a great week ahead. Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.